Hi, I'm Emily from Homemade Emily Jane. Have you ever struggled with poor thread tension or fragile threads that break and snap easily? As a sewer and a quilter, I have struggled with that before too, and in this video we are going to talk about thread tension as well as the HUSQVARNA Viking machines that I use and love and a special feature that they offer. If you've been sewing for any amount of time, I'm sure you're familiar with tension. Obviously, having good tension on your stitches is what makes them come out perfectly so that there's not too tight on either the top thread or the bobbin thread, and you get that stitch to actually meet in the middle of your fabric nice and perfectly. You can tell if your tension is off by sewing with a different color in your top and your bottom threads and taking a look at how the stitches look. If you can see one of the colors popping up on either the top or the bottom, that means you need to adjust your tension. And of course, I always recommend to do it in small increments and test as you go to find the perfect setting on your machine. Of course, I'm a bit spoiled because I've been using some really cool sewing machines that automatically adjust my tension for me and have some other really cool features that I cannot wait to share with you about. The secret to getting perfect thread tension every time is the deLuxe stitch system exclusively on HUSQVARNA Viking sewing machines. I have a few different sewing machines and two of them that I own have this awesome deLuxe stitch system feature, and so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. But first off, let's talk a little bit about how thread tension works. Regardless of what type of sewing machine you have, the most traditional, typical way that your threads get fed through the machine involve your top thread being placed in between two discs and those discs pushed together to create tension on your thread. Whether you have a manual machine or a computerized machine, they all will have some sort of tension adjustment device. Maybe it's a knob or an up and down button system, or maybe it's automatically adjusted on your machine. My machines do automatically adjust, but then of course I also have the option to manually change it as well if the tension is too tight or too loose. One of the problems that you might face if your tension is too tight is wonky stitches. However, if you're using more fragile thread, you might have more severe problems, such as your thread breaking and snapping and shredding when you don't want it to. That's where the deLuxe stitch system comes into play. On the HUSQVARNA Viking machines that have the exclusive deLuxe stitch system, the computer can automatically tell what kind of thread and fabric you're using and can determine which method to use between two options. Either thread tension, which involves the disc pushing together on the thread, or thread portioning, which involves the disc completely separating and allowing the thread to move freely and portioning out the exact amount of thread that you need for each stitch. Now, to figure out exactly how much thread is needed for each stitch, the computer has to take into account the thickness of your thread as well as the type of stitch that you're using and the thickness of your fabric that you're sewing on. So it's very complex, and obviously we use the computer to do that. But the really neat thing is that it keeps metallic or other fragile threads from breaking. The most amazing and wonderful thing about thread portioning is that the tension is no longer applied to the thread, meaning that it will not break while you're sewing delicate threads. So you might be asking, why is the deLuxe stitch system so important? Obviously, you can use a sewing machine without it, and I have for years, but having this awesome feature allows me to sew any type of thread on any type of fabric with confidence. And this involves regular straight stitching, decorative stitches, or even embroidery designs as well. So having this really awesome wide variety of options allows me to go into any sewing project with confidence. If you want to check out exactly how the deLuxe stitch system works, there's a video linked above put out by the HUSQVARNA Viking channel that shows a really cool graphic of how it works. So you can check that out and take a look at how the thread is fed through the machine and the two different options between thread tension and thread portioning. And finally, let's talk about which sewing machines include the deLuxe stitch system as one of its features. The first machine that I got that had this feature was the Designer Brilliance 80. It is a sewing machine with an embroidery attachment component to it. So that's the one that I use for any of my embroidery work, but it's also really great for sewing or quilting as well. And more recently, I've gotten the Epic 95Q machine, which is specifically meant for quilters, and it also includes the deLuxe stitch system. The Epic 95Q works out really well for me as a quilter because it has great throat space and is really built for quilters, but I love that it can adjust based on the thread that I'm using because sometimes I do other projects as well or want to use a decorative thread on my quilt projects. Other machines that do include this feature also include the Designer Epic series, the Designer Ruby, and many others. I'll actually put a list of them all in a blog post on my website, which you can get a link to in the description down below. If you want to find the exact perfect sewing machine for you, go check out your local sewing machine dealer. But of course, if you have any HUSQVARNA specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer whatever I can. Thank you so much for watching. Happy sewing!